Hey everybody, welcome to the Asian Americans. Jerry here. Before we get started with our episode, which features a very cool conversation that I had with child psychiatrist Dr. Jang Cho, I want to highlight another Asian American business that is doing really, really awesome things for our community, especially in this time of need, and it is none other than the Cosmos. Cosmos is a digital community created by our episode 2 guest, Cassandra Lamb, and her partner, Karen Mock. They have a number of different things that I want to highlight. They have an email newsletter called the Care Package, a weekly newsletter that is providing a lot of different resources and tools for people to get through these challenging times. They have a brand new podcast called A Place of Care, where Karen and Cassandra are talking about the issues that are impacting all of us. And this week and every week going forward, there are a number of different digital events to create a place where women can come together, share, and heal together in these uncertain times so that we are making sure that there's a place for self-care and for community. Check the Cosmos out at jointhecosmos.com or on Instagram at jointhecosmos. Sign up for the events, sign up for their newsletter, follow them on social media. They're doing really great work out there. So much thanks to Karen and Cassandra for all that you do. And if you'd like to hear Cassandra's story, check out her episode, which is episode number 2 that aired on March 3rd. So thanks again for listening. And here now is my conversation with Dr. Cho. Hey everybody, welcome to Dear Asian Americans, where this week we are talking to the helpers in our community. Given all that is going on in the world and here locally, wherever you may be, the coronavirus is really changing the way we view the world and really changing the way we act as members of our community. I am your host, Jerry Wan, and today I am really, really excited to have Dr. Jang Cho on the show. She's a board-certified child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I wanted to have her on the show to talk to us a little bit more about some of the unspoken topics in our community in general, like mental health, especially when it comes to whether you are the child in your current relationship with your parents or you are a parent and dealing with some of the mental health issues, because I think we can all agree that that is something that we haven't talked enough of and have not been as open about in our community. Welcome, Dr. Cho, to the show.
Thank you. So I'm so honored to be here today. I really love your podcast. I've been listening since it started, and I'm just so happy to be on it myself.
That's a fun fact. So I found Dr. Cho because she followed us on Instagram, and I said, "Oh my God, you're a child psychiatrist. Can you come on the show and talk about mental health within the Asian American community?" And she said, "Not only am I a child psychiatrist, that's my actual passion." So I don't believe it's serendipity. I think it's all happens for a reason. So Dr. Cho, share with us sort of your adolescent years, your where you grew up, where you studied, what motivated you to pick, going to med school. Also, take it upon yourself to make studying the Asian American children and adolescents part of your passion and your studies.
I was born and raised in Korea. And I moved to United States when I was 14 for high school. So I'm kind of the quintessential 유학생. Or nowadays there's a term for us called parachute children, because the parents ride on the plane and they drop the children. So that's how I ended up in boarding school in Michigan for high school. So from there, so my parents stayed in Korea, and from there, I've developed really good interest in biology and had my mindset going to go to medical school, and ended up going to Georgetown for college and medical school. And I actually had no interest in being a psychiatrist. Really didn't think that's ever going to happen. I was actually very gung-ho surgery, and I was very interested in surgery from the very get-go. So after medical school, I matched in surgical residency in Philadelphia, and actually really liked being in the operating room. But long story short, I ended up quitting general surgery residency after 2.5 years. Usually the surgery residency is 5 years old, so I was almost halfway done. The short version of why why I quit, I actually lost about 25 pounds and was losing hair. So basically, stress. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was very stressed, but also just unaware of mental health, basically. Uh, I one day I just woke up and said, "This is not the way that I can live with life like this. I don't think I can go on." And I ended up calling my program director on a Saturday morning. She answered her phone, which is miraculous too. And so I'm done. And she got me out of the residency in 2 weeks. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was like 10 years ago. So after going through school and school and school after directly for the first time, I didn't have any direction. I didn't know what to do. I ended up going home to Korea, and this is a funny story because I ended up in airplane landing on January 1st of 2010. Um, and so I was jobless, homeless, directionless, and also realized on the airplane that I was turning 30 that day in Korean age. So it was a really low point. um, so I actually didn't want to go back to medicine for a long time. So I ended up doing like all kinds of like very random jobs. Like I was in New York for a little bit. Was in working as a cashier for a chocolate shop. This and that. Just kind of trying to figure things out. I ended up going back to Korea, and by chance, I ended up being an SAT tutor in Korea, not because I like SATs, but because it paid really well. So I ended up taking a pretty serious job doing a lot of tutoring for kids who actually, like myself, who are yuakseng and were home for vacations, and they were going to hot ones. And during that process is when I realized I actually really like working with teens, not just
Mm.
teaching, but kind of like going over their struggles and how to help them and listening to them. And I really connected very well with them. And so that's how I ended up kind of regaining my motivation. I had to reapply all over again, restarted my training in psychiatry with intention of going into child and adolescent psychiatry. So that's how I ended up in child psychiatry.
But that's, I mean, one, wow. Because you did it twice, right? So
Yeah, I was really old.
my father was similar. He was a physician in Korea, then decided to move here. And so he had to take the boards and all that stuff
Hmm.
again and did residency again
Hmm.
in his 40s while we were in high school. So, um, it's not easy. Um, it's physically demanding and emotionally, mentally draining. So, I mean, you did not give up. You just pivoted and found something that meant more to you. So I think that's super awesome. Where I want to go next with this conversation is in your early years, as you started to talk to adolescents, young folks, and with the particular, I guess, lean towards fellow Asian Americans, what were some of the things that you were seeing in your conversations from the community that you were surprised by, and maybe you were not surprised by?
In terms of the topics that we were talking about, I think was that none of them were surprising per se, because I actually really like talking about it because I went through the similar topics of struggle through my young adulthood and high school and young adulthood, and so the things are family pressure, feelings of guilt, honoring the parents' wishes, not losing face, doing well to meet the expectations. Those are the things that were really, really, really big on the minds of these young kids. And then as I ended up treating a lot of the Asian American children, because there aren't that many Asian American child psychiatrists anywhere, a lot of the family conflicts, generational gap that really drifts both parents and children from each other. All of those things, the big topics that really I identified with. My big interest is what we call cultural psychiatry, basically, and immigrant families. Of course, all immigrant families have difficulties, but I think for Asian Americans, there's very particular ways and reasons why it really weighs kids down. And those are the things that I do work to see if I can help each and every family that I meet, but also in a bigger scale as well.
Thank you for doing that. I am an immigrant kid myself. I think as we grow up in America or wherever you may be, you start talking to people and you get this sudden sense that you just are not understood, right? And I think,
Mhm.
particularly within the psychiatry world, the therapy world, where you still don't see a lot of people that look like me and you, I think, the lack of understanding of the origin story and the cultural nuances and things that are just things that we almost feel like we are born with, the way our parents react to things or what their expectations are. Um, I think having that base level covered so you don't have to explain to somebody why you are feeling something, I think is one of the most under talked about things when it comes to mental health. So first, I want to thank you for doing the work that you've decided to do. I mean, even just thinking now about what you must have gone through and how much stress you were under to quit what was supposed to be the best thing that you were supposed to do, right? In getting a surgery residency, which is, what everybody or every doctor aspires to do from a prestige and whatever perspective. I don't know how to frame this, but I think we are going through a lot right now
Mhm.
as a world, as a lot of parts of the country are being actually, forced or being highly urged to stay home. And this has happened very quickly. Even 10 days ago, even a week ago, we saw it, or many people saw it, as not our problem yet. The response from a collective community perspective has been mixed, with alarm bells from certain members of our community. Regardless of generation number or age or profession, I think different people came to understand the urgency of what was about to happen very, very differently. In particular, I think in certain pockets of immigrant communities, their urgency was not there, particularly maybe I'll call our parents' generation. And so many of us had to have conversations with our parents and still feeling that we're not being heard because of some of the cultural norms or expectations that exist, given our Asian cultural norms. Um, what are some things that you can share with me and with our audience to, I guess it's twofold. One, practical tips on how to have difficult conversations with people who value knowledge and wisdom based on age more than anything else. And two, just how to process all that when you're right or you feel right you're right, but the frustration is building. And I'm not, I guess I'll caveat that it's not just our parents or those of a different generation. There are friends amongst us who are in our peer group who have taken a little bit longer to get the message that this is as serious as we needed to take.
COVID-19 has been a big eye opener for a lot of us, I think, and for me, I think, because in many different layers, I think there's a lot of fear. I do get a lot of scary stories from my physician colleagues who are in the front line. I'm a child psychiatrist. I'm not on in the front lines, but I do have friends who are in the emergency rooms and hospitals, and so that's been very scary. And to see some of the other people who are not taking this very seriously and not taking social distancing as something that they need to do, and it's very frustrating. Another layer is you're talking about is about with your parents, right? I think this brings on multiple layers too, because not because of Corona, just Corona, but I think this is a pattern that maybe you might have faced all your life where you are talking to them, but maybe you feel like they're talking at you and not listening to you. A lot of the immigrant families, because of the generation gap, but also cultural gap and some language gaps too, I have encountered that parents will talk at the children, but they don't really talk with the children. And as a child, you can feel this kind of helplessness that you don't feel like you're being heard and you're not being understood, and your fears or anxiety or your feelings are not being validated. And with something so scary like corona, especially when you have an elderly parent, you worry about them and you're telling them about what to do so that they can protect themselves from it, and they're not listening. It can be very traumatic in a lot of ways and can bring up a lot of feelings that you felt even when you were children. So it's a big, difficult topic, but I think in general, I would take an approach that I take with my patients' parents. So I have a lot of experience working with Asian American kids and teens when they come into my mental health clinic, and their parents who have similar attitude or similar opinions about their children's mental well-being. And I think that one of the things that I do that might not all the time, but sometimes can change their mind is not talking about statistics or numbers or what it can do, because I think they all know that already. They just don't want to hear it. But what you can do is you can, talk to them and talk about their love for your child, right? So my example is when the child is deeply depressed, I talk about how much the parents really do care for their child. And this is one of the ways supporting them through their illness can be very, very important for you as a parent to be there for your child, and how that is so impactful for your child. So in some ways, I think you kind of change it around so that your conversation is about your parents' love for you. You can't say, well, mom and dad, you can't leave, you can't go to church because you're going to die. But what you can say is, I'm really afraid that this might really make you sick, and I really don't want to lose my parents. And I think that that's the way that you have to kind of convince your parents that this is going to be really affecting you, their child, and that might be helpful for them.
Thank you for sharing that. I think given the urgency of the public health pending crisis, or already existent pending crisis, or existing crisis rather, that I think is an approach that many of our listeners have or need to take, and then to plead with them from an emotional perspective of, this comes from a place of love and care, not that we don't want you to go to the market or run your own errands. When we're not in these potentially life-altering situations where the stakes don't seem as bad yet, there are a lot in the community who have been dealing with mental health concerns and suppression of emotions and not being able to fully express certain things because of just the circumstances of the immigrant experience of survival first and lack of understanding of the cultural and generational context. I know that's a lot. But my question, I guess, or ask of you is, what are some things that we can practice on a continual basis so that we are working on mental health self-care for ourselves continually, so that when it comes to these situations, and again, not necessarily telling our parents we love them, so please don't go out. I find in my peers a lot that we just are not used to expressing emotions as openly as some of our non-Asian, non-immigrant friends.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting topic, because you're right. We've never really had a role model, right? To see that the expression of love is through verbal and physical actions. As a parent myself, I think it's important for me to kind of think about that and my relationship with my parents, right? And then kind of reflect that and say, well, what kind of relationship do I want with my child, right? And do I do those things? Do I tell my child I love you? Do I hug my child and give them kisses? And at least for our generation, we have that capacity to know that that is the way that other people know how I feel, right? I think the generation above us, especially our parents, didn't have luxury of kind of having that verbal expression shown to them or knowing that that's actually the way that we express things. That's not the way they were raised. Doesn't mean that they don't like it. I think I think it's important that if you do want to have that kind of relationship with your parents, then you do have to initiate it, and it's very 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 awkward initially. But I think once you start doing it, I think it's very helpful. One of the something that I saw, there's a compilation of a video that one of the centers that I work with had done. It was a video of college kids, Asian American college kids, and each of them call their parent and say I love you on the phone. And it was so amazing to see what the parent does after the child says I love you. um, there's a little pause as
Mm,
expected.
yeah.
But all of them say back I love you to their child in English,
Wow.
in Chinese, in Korean, whatever the language they're using, right?
Hmm.
They just don't have the words to do it. They don't have the initiative to do it because it is awkward. But when you do initiate that, I think it becomes a norm. Then they're able to do that too. And yes, it is hard because you're like, well, they're the parent and I'm the child, and that's they should start. But I think apart from thinking about that kind of relationship, what relationship you want to have? Do you want to have with your parents from now on? And you have to put your foot forward and say, well, I'm going to make that brave step first, right? And that can make a big difference.
And in the same vein, I think there something that I've learned as a parent myself, and certainly as I've grown up, is also understanding that having empathy and trying to understand how they grew up in what context and how that informs their definition of affection and love. Because I think in our closer to home Korean context, it was occupation, it was war, it was poverty. In my Vietnamese friends' context, it's war and then refugee status, and everybody has a different way of how they got here. For me, it took me a much longer than I would have, enjoyed, I guess, to really understand that. Not that we have to cut them some slack, but it's worth thinking about from where they get their definitions, right? So we often talk about our mothers, particularly using food as a love language rather than words, using food as apology, of just about anything, and just simply asking, hey, have you eaten yet? And then that sort of is the universal thing that emotes everything. And so I do think that, while I don't know, I think it's somewhere in the middle, at least from my experience of understanding how they, view things.
I think that's really important point, and I think this is why your podcast is so helpful because when you do hear individuals' history and story, I think that's when you have a better understanding of where they come from, right? And
Hmm.
and so and that's where you can understand that maybe that the way that they portray things doesn't mean that they're trying to hurt myself, right? Hurt me. It's
Right.
just their way of limitation and way of expressing things. And I think that's very important, not just in parent child relationship. Yes, it is for definitely for immigrant families because there's such a gap, and a lot of the kids don't necessarily know their parents story, right? Especially
Right.
because parents are so busy. But
Hmm.
also, I think it shows, even in bigger scale, like talking about racism, I think when you get to know a person of different ethnicity in a personal level, right, to know about their story, they're no longer just like a person of an ethnicity. It's a person in my life, right?
Right.
Because I know their story. And that really breaks down the walls and breaks down preconceived notions about people. And I think that's why I'm so drawn into psychiatry, because by nature I have to listen to people's story, and that makes my life fuller in ways.
I think this conversation has been extremely enlightening and heartening. One of the side effects or silver linings of all that's happened is, I think, a return to humanity um,
Mhm.
on a global scale, of a lot of us accepting that the things that we thought were super important and non-negotiable just a short time ago, all of a sudden don't seem so important anymore. I think the outpouring of emotion towards our parents, however it has been expressed, in thoughtfulness or sometimes in just emotional anger, is because we care about them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I there's so much bad and just negativity in the world, with the racism and with the virus and everything. I am eternally hopeful that for many families out there, and at least if you are a parent of teenagers or adolescents, holy crap, you're stuck at home with them, right? You're sequestering together. You're in isolation together. So I do think that, looking back at this time period, I do hope that this is a time where families can have dialogue that they otherwise don't or couldn't. You're sort of stuck, right? Mom and dad can't go to work and blow off the kids. Teenagers can't say, I hate you. I'm going to go hang out with my friends and walk out the door,
Mhm.
because we are. And then there's only so much staying in my room and being on my devices can do. Share with us your top one, two, three tips for that environment of, let's talk to the parents first, of how do you make the best out of the current situation where, you want to make the most out of this potentially once in a lifetime opportunity to be stuck at home with your kids. And if your kids are in college, this might be the last time, because if they graduate and they move, you're not going to get this back with them.
The number one thing that I would say is to be brave. Brave enough to share how you really feel. Share your fears, share your love, share your hopes for your children and your parents and your family and your loved ones, because that's where it starts. And you can make that first step for your parents so they can hold your hands. You can make that first step for your children and your teenage children, because you're modeling that for them. And you can do that for your friends and loved ones, because then you are making that step for yourself too.
And what about top advice for high school, college students who are dreading being stuck at home with their parents and feeling extra frustrated because they don't have a physical outlet of separation?
Well, the concrete answer would be FaceTime with friends. um, Lock yourself in. um, but I think it is a good time to actually think about, when you go back to your childhood, and what did you really enjoy with your parents, and kind of this is your chance to get to know your parents, right? And so yes, it can be a little difficult, and yes, it can be irritating, but maybe you can share a show with them and start from there. It doesn't have to be anything big about, like you don't have to have a discussion about world love and racism. You can have a discussion about, how good looking some actor is. And that, just meeting at the lowest point and starting there, and, take your time, because I think you're going to have a lot of time at home.
Yeah, it's, as a joke or out of jest, we're seeing a lot of our parent friends, particularly of kids that are a little bit older, just, oh my god, this is insanity. How do you homeschool, work from home,
Hmm.
and deal with their attitude all day and all night? And we're, for the most parts of the country, we're still just in week one. of we don't know how long it's going to go, and some states have school or canceled school for the rest of the school year, so you're talking at least 2 or 3 months. You're right. I think this, if not now, on both sides, whether you're the parent or the child, just be brave and blame it on the social isolation, right? Blame it on the fact that you guys are stuck at home. And maybe it starts with, hey, we're stuck at home anyway, so why don't we sit down, and talk? Or, I've always wanted to ask you and we never get a chance to talk, so insert whatever. I don't think we're ever going to get a time like this with the people you're stuck with right now. I would ask, if you are either parent or child listening to this, maybe we create something that is, makes it a little bit easier to take that bold step of starting conversation. In light of all that's going on and in a lot of feeling frustrated, I do think that this can be such a great opportunity for healing and talking about things we never really get to talk about with our parents and with our children. And so even just, having the last 30 minutes to talk to you, Dr. Cho, I think it's been an eye-opening insight for me to really make the most of this golden opportunity. A lot of jokes about how many Netflix shows you can watch in a day and all that binge stuff, and which is fine because I think everybody needed a break, just a forced pause, whether it was work or school or something else. But you're right, maybe watch that show with your parents and explain to them why you think it's funny, or just suck it up and watch something that interests them and try to understand why. But there are a lot of difficult barriers within our community, whether it be cultural understanding, generational gap, and even language differences, because some parents didn't really, they were so busy working and then trying to make it, possible for the families to survive, that a lot of children don't really speak their mother tongue as well as they'd like, or the parents haven't picked up English because life is life. Man, this has been kind of a good pause for me too. This week has been an emotionally challenging week for me. And so thank you. I feel like I just had a conversation with a psychiatrist and let the whole world in on it. Uh, any final tidbits or tips that you'd like to share for our audience?
As a true psychiatrist manner, I would like everybody to take some time for themselves and manage your own anxiety about things. Take a break, even if it's just 10 minutes at a time, because I think managing your own anxiety is going to make everything else much less anxious too. I'm definitely doing that.
Reach out if you need help, I think would be my
Yes.
contribution there. I think we're at the precipice of this wave of us, the Asian American community, saying it's about time we talk about mental health issues as healthcare, as a necessity. Nonprofits, a lot of, for profit, a lot of folks out there really making the facilitation of these conversations more readily acceptable and certainly less of a stigma. So, yeah, I mean, all of you, if you're listening to this closer to when it was uploaded, you got a lot of time. We all do. So, Dr. Cho, I want to end the show in the same way that we end all of our shows, and it is to go back to the theme or the spirit of the name of the show, which is Dear Asian Americans, which I was inspired to create this conversation in the form of a love letter to us, from us in the community, to really say the things that maybe we wish we would have heard, or things that you believe that we need to share with each other now. So, if you would, I will start the letter and help us finish out. Dear Asian Americans.
This is the time that we should take care of yourselves, but also look after each other. And it is time for us to mobilize. We are the shakers and movers. We just didn't know it. And we are capable of making differences in our lives and other people's lives. And we I would love to see Asian Americans really work on mobilizing, making our voices heard, in both in our families, but also in our communities and in a bigger sense of world.
Thank you. I think, I mean, it's again a very challenging time for many of us, frustrating time, emotional time, scary time. And we haven't even talked about financial insecurity. It's you got to come back to talk about that, I guess, in the light of what's pending for a lot of young folks. I'm going to actively myself, and I encourage all of you who are listening to really, in the midst of all this uncertainty, focus on what you can control, which are the conversations that can happen within your four walls at a time where you really can't go out and blow your parents off or make an excuse to pretend to be busy. And for the parents, work has changed for a lot of us. It's not as demanding. People are being a little bit more understanding. So prioritize, set aside some time, however it works for you within your family context. Talk about things, open up, heal, cry, and let's rise from this together, I guess, as a community, but have it start at home because I think we all need it. So yeah, Dr. Cho, thanks again for investing time into sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you for the work that you do within our Asian American community. Yeah, magical things happen on Instagram. If this is if this can be a testament to your folks out there, one quick practical tip to people who are trying to grow brands on Instagram: DM every single person that follows you, thank them, engage in conversation. This is how this episode happened, and a slight preview of how many other episodes that are being planned right now. Because yeah, if people are coming to your page and engaging with your content, the easiest thing you can do is to spend 30 seconds to say thank you in a genuine way. So thank you again, Dr. Cho, for coming on the show. I hope that brighter days are coming sooner than later. Forever gratitude for the work that you do and for you sharing your thoughts with us today.
Oh, no, thank you for inviting me.
All right, everybody, stay safe out there. Stay home. Tell your parents, I love you. Surprise them. I don't know. Do something wild. Make the best of the situation that we have. I love you guys. I thank you guys for listening. Share this episode with two friends if they need to hear it. Heck, share this episode with your parents if you think they need to hear it. And reach out to me directly if you want to talk. And I will see you guys next time here on Dear Asian Americans.